Starfield is a game that people have hated on basically since it came out, all the way back in September of 2023. Back when the game came out, I was a really big Bethesda fan. I'm not as much of a Bethesda fan anymore, and partially because of that game. Now it's 2026, and we're a little bit more than a week away from the game releasing on PlayStation 5, and it's going to be coming with two editions. You got the Standard Edition, $49.99. Your Premium Edition, $69.99. The Standard's just going to have your base game and your free lanes update. Premium Edition, you're talking about the Shattered Space DLC and the Terran Armada. The Terran Armada DLC. 1,000 creation credits, Constellation skin pack, digital art book, digital soundtrack. When Starfield first came out, I was not particularly excited for it. I had a little bit of enthusiasm because it was a Bethesda game, and I thought, okay, well, maybe Fallout in space or Elder Scrolls in space could be kind of cool. Even though space is not my preferred backdrop for most of the games that I play. Although somehow I always end up playing space games. I don't know. But I haven't touched the game since around the time it came out. And I know there's been numerous updates and improvements to the game. There's been a couple times I've tried to re-download it, get back into it, and it just couldn't hold my attention. And since the game is releasing soon on PS5, I started thinking about my experiences with Starfield, and I started wondering if maybe I've been too harsh on this game. Maybe there's a great game in there somewhere, and I'm just playing it wrong. Maybe it's my fault. And then I started thinking back to when I was a PlayStation player, because I've owned every PlayStation console, and I used to primarily play on PS5. And this is exactly the type of game that I would buy if they brought it over. And then I remembered, those of us on Xbox and PC, well, we got to play this game on Game Pass, which means we didn't have to shell out big money for it, it just came at the cost of our subscription. So for those of us that really didn't like the game, we had an opportunity to learn that we really didn't like the game before shelling out our hard-earned cash for it. And PlayStation players aren't going to have that opportunity. So I thought I'd take a look back at it and see if this game is really as bad as I remembered it to be. Now the first thing I had to do was re-download it and jump back on to my save file, which was about 36 hours in. 37? Something like that. And for the most part I had been ignoring the primary story of the game. I've been trying to go off and do my own thing, because that's typically how I have fun in Bethesda games. If I'm playing Skyrim or I'm playing Fallout 4, I'm not playing it for the main narrative. The main allure of those games is just kind of picking a direction and going off and exploring. And I tried to tackle Starfield the same way, which I think is part of what made me not like the game. Because you don't really get the same curated world with lots of handmade content all across the entire galaxy. Instead, you just have loading screens, and then more loading screens. You load to get to the next galaxy. You load to get to the next galaxy. Then you load to get close to the planet. Then you load to land on the planet. Then you load to get off of your spaceship. It's a lot of loading. And if you're picking random planets to go onto, it's very unlikely you're going to find anything of consequence or interest. And Bethesda's been consistent in telling us that that's just the way it's supposed to be, because when they really went up into space, that wasn't boring. They were in space and there was nothing happened and it wasn't boring for them. They were really in space. Allegedly. Anything could have happened. So it was probably exciting. This is a video game. Anything cannot happen. Only what you have programmed can happen. This is not the same. But never mind. At least they serve a purpose. The planets serve a purpose. You can go, you can explore, you can kind of do the equivalent of finding junk in Fallout 4 to build your settlements. You can create little space bases on whatever planet you want, and it will hold your interest for a little bit until you do it enough, and then it starts to become repetitive. And that's the difference between this and something like Crimson Desert, where a lot of people don't like Crimson Desert, and they were filtered out in the first 2 hours, because the first 2 hours, the people who love that game will tell you, that's the most boring part of the game. It's just not a great intro. But then as you go on, people seem to adore that game. Starfield doesn't have that issue. Starfield has a pretty decent introduction to the game. You start out, you're a miner, you touch magic rock does magic rock thing, and you find out you're the Starborn, you're the chosen one, and you're off to a whirlwind adventure because somebody comes and tells you, oh yeah, you're obviously one of the chosen ones. You got to come with us, and we're gonna go on a space adventure to find the meaning of life. But there are no aliens in this game. A lot of people. Space is colonized by humans. You're not gonna find Saiyans or Viltrumites or Zetans or Thetans, the Greys. You're not going to find Xenu or any of that. The only aliens that you will find will be like quadrupedal, aggressive, well, sometimes aggressive, enemies on certain planets, just like alien wildlife, basically. So between alien wildlife, people, and machines, that's pretty much the entire population of the game. So the story sees you following a group of explorers and scientists as they try to uncover the mystery of these magic rocks, magic space rocks. And I followed it for a little bit, but I mostly went off to do things on my own. But as I came back to the game after I re-downloaded it and did the thing that I swore to myself I would never do again, re-downloaded Starfield, and after I came back to it, I decided I would pursue a little bit more of the main narrative. And during that time, initially I had to readjust myself to the controls. The controls are very Bethesda-centric. They're going to be very similar to most of the other Bethesda games you've played, but they're going to have like their own little updated UI, and things are going to be slightly different and geared more towards just this game specifically. But after you get used to it, it's all very similar. The systems are all the same in terms of hiding, crouching, sneaking, lockpicking, charisma-based dialogue choices, or occasionally faction-based dialogue choices. So as I proceeded to my quest point, I had to readjust myself to the flying mechanics. And I actually like the flying mechanics. Now, not in the sense that this is well designed for me specifically. I struggled at it. I'm not great at it, but I like what they've done. And I can understand why people really appreciate this or enjoy this type of flight and flight combat, where you're putting energy towards your engines, or you're putting energy towards your shield, or you're putting energy towards weapon systems. You're not just pressing a button to go and pressing a button to shoot. You have to kind of manage your energy on your ship. And your ships upgrade in multiple different ways. You can build a ship from scratch. I've done the shipbuilding before. Actually, I like the shipbuilding. I do remember spending a good bit of time on that. Any complaints I have about the flight and the way that you fly and pilot your ship are purely just based on personal opinion. I actually think it's a pretty good system overall that a lot of people will enjoy or do enjoy. And of course, when you're flying around, it's just like one small star system, galaxy with a few planets, and then you're going to have to jump to the next one with your grav drive, which is, a loading screen away. And a lot of the animations for doing things like jumping to the next system, or docking with another ship, or landing or taking off from a planet, they all look very cool. The first 4 or 5 times you see them, they look awesome. But they will wear down on you eventually if you see them enough times. They are kind of glorified loading screens, and if the game didn't already have so many transition loading points, I think it would be easier to get over that. And then as I get back to my quest, I start to look at the character models, and I start looking around, and I realize this is definitely the best looking game visually that Bethesda has ever made. There's certainly no question that this looks a lot better than, say, your Skyrim or Fallout 76 or Fallout 4. Visually, the models just look a lot better. In certain lighting, they can sometimes look really good, and then in certain lighting, they can look really bad. It just kind of depends. But the bar was not that high for Bethesda to begin with, and I didn't have a high personal expectation for that anyway. Interacting with characters and NPCs in regards to quest objectives is all pretty run-of-the-mill Bethesda stuff. If you've played Fallout, you're gonna get it pretty much immediately. The dialogue mini-game for convincing people to do things, your speech checks, they have like a different flow to them, but it's also arbitrary. You'll catch on so fast, it doesn't even really seem to matter. And it doesn't seem very frequent that any of your decisions will really lock you out of quests or experiences. Bethesda doesn't really like to do that anymore. It's like they just really don't want to lock you out. They want to make sure you can experience everything that they have to offer on your first playthrough. But the dialogue's all serviceable. The characters look pretty good. The combat isn't horrible. It's serviceable. Again, it's not going to blow your mind. You're not going to be looking forward to each combat interaction scenario But I think most people who are kind of used to Bethesda's games are going to find the combat serviceable enough. At first, it wasn't really making me rethink anything. In fact, it was really hard to get back into this, kind of a slog. But then as I kept going, I kept pursuing the main quest that I was on, and I kind of started to lock in. I started to zone out, in a good way. I was focused on the dialogue, I was thinking about my dialogue choices, and I was making some choices that I wouldn't normally make in another game just to see what would happen. And I felt like the way that I was completing missions had some sort of consequence, or was at least different than if I had made some other choices. Interesting enough to keep my attention, for sure. And believe me, I realize that there are a lot of people that are fans of Starfield. When I first played this game, I was in a lot of gaming communities, and I can remember a lot of outspoken Starfield fans. I don't know if they were just coping or if they were serious, but I took them seriously, and I'm pretty sure there's still quite a few Starfield fans out there. And if you are, I think I'm starting to get it. While it doesn't offer the same curated world that you want to live in kind of situation that Bethesda's previous games do, it doesn't have the same amount of deep lore or world building or this living, breathing sense of world that they've created. The atmosphere and emptiness and loneliness of being out in space, flying around on your ship, being able to get up while you're in space and just kind of walk around your ship, take a nap, talk to your companions, get back in the seat, hail another ship. There are some random encounters that happen while you're in space. You can be invited onto ships. You can dock onto ships. You can steal ships. You can engage pretty much anybody. I'm terrible at the ship combat. I had a decent ship, but I wasn't using it for this particular part of the gameplay I was doing. And I would just get obliterated a lot of times in combat because, I gotta switch all my shields and energy and everything around. It's a little much for me. It'll take some getting used to for me to get back into that. But that doesn't mean it's bad. I'm not saying the ship combat is bad. I actually kind of like it. I think it's refreshing and it's kind of its own thing. And I do have an appreciation for it, even if it's not my favorite way of doing ship combat. I think it definitely has its place. I think like most people, I just wish that there was a little bit more in the way of curated worlds that you could just explore, or areas that weren't just this RNG, procedurally generated seeming planet full of one base, two base, a few basic recycled assets here and there, and really nothing super interesting if you're just trying to wander around and explore. Now, the planets and areas that are handcrafted and curated, they are pretty good. I mean, they're densely packed, they're not bad. Some are better than others. Some of them are downright confusing on how to navigate. And the fact that there's so many loading areas and transitional screens doesn't help. But it isn't as bad as I remember. And some of that might be because of updates, performance updates especially. Some of that might be that I've just kind of gone numb to Bethesda in general. I've come to expect very little from them. Some of that might be because I'm not so invested in Bethesda anymore. I don't see them as a company that's going to be setting any more standards ever again. I would love to be proven wrong. And like I said, I have massive amounts of love for their previous games. Even in spite of the people who hated those, I still like Fallout 4 a lot. For the world building, for the lore, for the open world that feels so alive. I'll still play Skyrim to this day. And jumping back into Starfield, I mean, this was obviously a personal project for Todd on some level, because their whole attitude the whole time has just been, bro, this is gonna be the best game we've ever made on this engine. It's gonna be our coup de grace, dude. And I just don't think anybody ever saw it like that. I don't think anyone sees it as the pinnacle of their writing or world building. But was I too harsh on it? Yeah, I think I was. And that's not to say that their criticisms aren't valid. Their criticisms are valid. There are plenty of things not to like about this game. But I will admit there are some things that I enjoy. Shamefully, I admit this. But is it worth the asking price to purchase it outright? For $49.99, standard edition? Yeah, if you know what you're getting into, and not just based off what I say, but if you watch some people's reviews, especially people who have been overly, really critical of the game, and it still sounds like something that appeals to you, then yeah, $50, sure, that's probably worth it. As far as the premium $69.99, $70 version, I would say maybe if you've already played it and you just love Starfield, but if you're just hesitant and you just want to check it out, it may be wiser just to upgrade to some of that stuff later if you end up liking the game. If you've never played it before, I don't know if I could recommend going in for a $70 version of it. But I care about the PS5 bros, and I don't want them to spend their money on something they're not going to enjoy. We already had disappointment, but Xbox and PC players, we got our disappointment basically for free for the price of a subscription. So it's just something to keep in mind and consider as you move forward with your purchases this year. If Starfield was running the standard edition for $70, there's no shot I would recommend this. Unless you just have already played it and love it. There's no shot I could recommend a new player getting into Starfield for $70. But the whole point of the video was, is it as bad as I remember? And after playing it for another 4 hours on top of my, 38 hours or whatever I had on there, 36 hours. Truthfully, no. It's not that bad. There are just certain aspects of the game that I really don't like. And it doesn't scratch the itch that I was looking for. And I think the biggest problem was the disappointment because so many people were looking for that next Bethesda Elder Scrolls Fallout experience, and instead we got something that is kind of approaching it but never really hits the mark. But the game still does have its player base, and it does still have its place, and some people on PlayStation will no doubt enjoy this game quite a bit. So for sure, do your research before you drop 50 to 70 bones on Starfield for the PlayStation 5. It's always a bummer when you dump a bunch of money into a product and it ends up leaving you disappointed. For a lot of people, I think this game will scratch whatever itch you're looking for, but for the people who are trying to scratch the Skyrim itch or the Fallout itch, it's not going to happen. For everybody else who still thinks that the game looks like something they'd very much be interested in, I wish you the very best. And please leave me a comment, let me know why you hate Starfield, why you love Starfield, or why you're completely indifferent to Starfield. I'm Krevix. I post new videos at least once a week. Give me a like and a subscribe if you like looking at my face or like listening to my beautiful voice, and I'll talk to you next time.